fire Lisa Cook, the Fed governor, over her
Yeah,
mortgage
I'll fire her
fraud?
if she doesn't resign, yeah. What she did was bad, so I'll fire her if she doesn't resign.
What are these allegations against Lisa Cook?
So the allegations against her are actually quite similar to the allegations that are against Tish James and Adam Schiff, and it is that on a mortgage application, she listed a residence as her primary residence that wasn't necessarily where she was living most of the year. This is actually a pretty common occurrence that we've seen in campaigns. This often, if someone does do this incorrectly, often leads to a fine. It's not something that's going to screw their entire life up. So it's interesting that, as soon as these allegations have surfaced, President Trump has already called for resignations.
Is there a criminal investigation into Cook right now? Like, what are the stakes here?
So Ed Martin did come out today and express interest in looking into this and has already written directly to the Federal Reserve chairman. So, right now he is explicitly investigating Adam Schiff and Tish James over such allegations, and just today has come out and said that he is very much open to looking into the latest allegations against the Fed Governor Lisa Cook.
In a shocking move that should alarm every American, Trump has just called for the resignation of Lisa Cook, who is a Fed governor. This happened shortly after the Trump administration claimed that Cook was involved in mortgage fraud, just like Adam Schiff. Now, let me explain to you why this is so important. Cook was nominated by Joe Biden in 2022 and confirmed by the Senate. She became the first ever Federal Reserve governor to be African American. She is one of 7 governors, including the chair, Jerome Powell, who vote to see if we should reduce rates or raise rates or keep them the same.
Now they're going after the black woman in the Fed. They're attacking us left and right, trying to put us in jail.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. So we got to talk about how President Trump is on the edge of what appears to be another big W, or what he would see as a big W, probably the biggest W of his administration thus far, if he can make this happen, which is to have the Federal Reserve lower interest rates. Okay, that is, I think, the one thing that President Trump wants the most out of basically everything going on right now. Okay, and what his administration is trying to do, he wants lower interest rates. He wants lower borrowing costs. He wants businesses to be able to take advantage of the big, beautiful bill. All of these beautiful provisions that were in the bill in order to help stimulate the economy. It would be more effective if interest rates were lowered by the Fed out of restrictive territory, which is where they're at now. Okay, and it looks like President Trump might be on the way to getting exactly what he wants, because it looks like he's going to have another opportunity to appoint a Fed board governor who has a vote, who has a say on whether or not interest rates will be lowered. Okay, again, the Fed board governor is somebody that is appointed by the President of the United States. They serve a certain amount of years, terms. They're confirmed by the Senate. And President Trump just recently appointed a Fed board governor, okay? And he also just had a couple of Fed board governors as well, too, disagree with Jerome Powell on the decision to keep interest rates steady. And now you have a Fed board governor who he possibly could fire, which would give him room to appoint another Fed governor, which could sway the Fed board in the direction of lowering interest rates. And it kind of looks like eventually that's going to happen, probably sooner rather than later. But again, in this story, we got to talk about here is Lisa Cook, okay, who is one of these Fed board governors. And she is now facing an investigation for alleged mortgage fraud, which appears to be quite common amongst government officials nowadays, okay? But in this case, again, you have a woman, okay, a sitting Fed board governor whose job is to help determine whether or not we should raise or lower interest rates, is allegedly committing fraud in order to artificially have interest rates for home personal loans lowered, right, for her mortgage, for her house. And again, that's a big problem. Clearly, you can see the conflicts of interest here. And I want to talk about it because in the long run, this could lead to President Trump getting what he wants, right? I think, again, the number one thing that he wants more so than anything, which is for the feds to lower interest rates. So I want to talk about it because, again, this is a much bigger story than what is being covered in the media. So let's get into it.
All right, folks, hanging in the air throughout the entire Jay Powell speech was a situation where Of course, we have Federal Reserve Governor Lisa Cook, that she now finds herself in. When asked about this, whether he would consider firing Cook, President Trump had this to say. Take a listen.
You're going to fire Lisa Cook, the Fed governor, over her
Yeah, I'll
mortgage
fire her
fraud?
if she doesn't resign, yeah. What she did was bad, so I'll fire her if she doesn't resign.
Now to my next guest, who actually made the initial discovery of possible mortgage application fraud. FHFA Director Bill Pulte joins me now. Bill, President Trump is obviously livid about this, but he's not the only one. Walk us through exactly what Cook did.
Well, we see mortgage fraud throughout the United States. It happens all the time. It's prosecuted all the time. And in Ms. Cook's case, it appears, from what we can tell, to be blatant mortgage fraud. She claimed to be living in the state of Michigan. She took out a loan, and then she went and took out another loan in Atlanta and said that both of them were her primary residence. That's a big no-no. You can't do that in our mortgage market. You have to be able to declare that it's a secondary home or an investment property. You have to fill out these applications correctly. And I don't really know why everybody's in a tiz when mortgage fraud is mortgage fraud. And to be clear, it's not everybody who's in a tiz.
Right.
It's really just the media.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's almost as if they believe that Democrats are above the law, right? Which, you know, they spent the last 4 years telling us nobody's above the law, just to find out they didn't really mean that. What they actually really meant was that wink, wink, nobody's above the law except Democrats, except the liberal elites, the people that we agree with, okay? The people that agree with the Democrat Party. But everybody else, though, no, you're not above the law. That is what they actually meant. And I hope that people kind of see that's what they actually meant by all of the boohoo, whining, crying, and the outrage that currently is happening because of the fact that Democrats are being held accountable. They're being held accountable.
Well, yeah, obviously the media, they're circling the wagons, but there was an attempt, a sort of clumsy attempt by the Kansas City Fed president today also. Actually, you posted that it was bizarre, and Senator Mike Lee just simply said, "End the Fed." So many thought that Powell was going to come to her rescue during his speech today.
I don't know. That whole thing was weird. It was weird, too, how people were saying that somehow that this was targeted. Look, we refer Republicans and Democrats together all the time. We don't look at political party when we refer people. If you commit mortgage fraud, and we believe that you commit mortgage fraud, we are going to report that. We have an obligation to report it. So that's really what we're focused on. And anything that people say to the contrary is just to distract from not following the law. The threshold question, Charles, is, do we have laws in this country? If we have laws in this country, they need to be followed. And so long as I'm in this seat, we're going to follow the law.
Yeah, well, for 4 years prior to this administration, all I heard was that nobody was above the law. So sort of ironic there. You actually say or talked about referring to more people. It sounds like high-profile folks. Can I get you to give me one of them right now?
No, I'm not going to be announcing who we're doing. We have to be very thoughtful with when and how we go about these investigations. I'd say one thing, which is, this is not personal, whether it's the people that we're going to be referring this afternoon or people that we refer every week. If we see that people are doing something that is risking the system, we're going to report it. My job, Charles, is to make sure that we have a safe and sound mortgage market. And when you misrepresent that you're going to occupy a home and you're not only are you cheating the system, but you're also causing the average person to pay more for their mortgage because the system has to price in that risk of failure for that mortgage, because if the bottom falls out in the economy, how are you going to be able to afford two homes? So it's a total scam when people try to do this stuff, and we're going to keep on prosecuting it, and we're not going to be intimidated by the liberal media or by some of these politicians who can't believe that they are above the law.
Facts. It's really that simple. Nobody's above the law. Again, Democrats are going to regret saying that for the last 4 years. They're going to regret that a lot. Okay, so again, the takeaway from this story right here, okay, is that if this woman decides to resign, which, she claims she's not going to, but if she resigns or she's fired by the president, then President Trump will be able to put another Fed board governor on the panel in order to influence whether or not the Fed is going to lower the federal funds rates. And unsurprisingly, Democrats, black liberals are upset with this because this woman is a black woman. She's a black economist. Trump is attacking black women. He's attacking black people. This is just another racist attack from President Trump.
They have allowed their racism to drive them insane. I mean, the examples you're giving, the one that I want to just pick up on, because Dr. Lisa Cook, a fellow black woman economist, impeccable credentials. You know, this man has thumbs and civility goes out the window. He doesn't know how to say anything that makes sense. He reduces himself, but he's already reduced, to calling people out of their name, calling them, you know, he did that with Kamala. He had all these names for her, has these names for people. But Dr. Cook is doing a good job. The only problem he has with Dr. Lisa Cook is that if she resigns, he has a vacancy on the Fed, and he can basically change the tone and tenor of what happens with interest rates. The members of the Fed, the 7 members of the Fed, essentially choose the heads of the 12 regional Fed members. And the 5 of those actually have input into interest rates. They have allowed their racism to drive them nuts, and we see it every day. I don't even know why they let this man go to a microphone. And by the way, you know, you don't have to be white adjacent, as some black people think they are. You could be plain old white like John Bolton.
Listen,
Your house will be raided
for the life of
if
me,
you disagree with this man. We really are moving into a crazy oligarchy where you said the man was stupid on CNN, and the next thing you know, your house is raided, your office is raided. You're not even there. Your wife, who
you got this historic black woman, Lisa Cook, on the Federal Reserve, and Donald Trump put out, go to my iPad, tweet, Cook must resign now. Another black woman who he is attacking.
That is a big deal, right? But it looks like that may not even be necessary, because Jerome Powell indicated just on Friday at an important speech that he is open to lowering rates, that rates may need to be lowered due to the fact that the labor market is weaker than we thought. Those revised jobs reports showing that there were hundreds of thousands of jobs that we thought existed that no longer exist. Also, on top of that, what you have is growth expectations going down, okay? Not as much growth as we should be getting. And some of that is caused by the fact that small businesses are struggling due to interest rates being in restrictive territory, okay? And Jerome Powell, again, seemed to indicate that he's open to lowering rates in September. And if, again, that is the case, then that is a major, major, major W for President Trump, or at least what he would see as a W, because that's what he wants. And the market rallied based off the idea, the current chances of a rate cut coming up in September. Take a look.
It's a busy Friday morning for everybody, including the market. The market is way up at 875 points already. That's a record high after Fed Chair Jerome Powell spoke in Jackson Hole, Wyoming this morning. And that's where we find Fox Business's Edward Lawrence. He's got the details on what was said. Hi, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Danny. Yeah, the markets have just taken off on the news. The Fed chairman hints there could be a rate cut. We could see it as soon as the September meeting here on inflation. The Fed chairman says that the effects of the tariffs are now clearly visible and they will accumulate over the next couple months. He says the inflation risk has now risen and the risk to the labor market has now fallen. He sees that's a change from the past year or so of his thinking there. But he says with inflation expectations well anchored, that the 2%, people believe inflation will be 2%, they can make that first rate cut, is what he's hinting. And that is what the market is reflecting on. Now, in the speech, there's a lot of hedgings, a lot of warnings. He talks about the potential price increases. He talks about the unemployment rate. He says that the immigration policy has led to an abrupt slowdown in the labor market. And the changes to the tax structure, he says, with the big, beautiful bill, has actually given positive growth and productivity signals for the future. He says that the labor market has significantly slowed in the past year, but it's not creating issues, because he believes what's happened is the labor market's now coming back into balance, and what they call the break-even rate, to stay at the unemployment rate of 4.2%, that is coming down. So again, seeing that labor market in balance. One last interesting note in this, the growth section of this speech, he talks about the growth is slowing down in the economy of the first couple months of this year. It is interesting that the restrictive stance, the higher interest rates from the Federal Reserve, does slow down the economy and gets consumers to slow down spending, and that's what he pointed to as the growth reduction. But again, that part of the speech was very short, and that kind of stuck out to me, because the Federal Reserve would possibly be a cause, or part of a cause for that slowdown. Back to you guys.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Okay, so again, this would be a big W for President Trump because this is what he wants. Right now, the current federal funds rate is 4.33%, and that's right in line with about the historical average, right? Now, the problem is that in the 2010s, interest rates went to damn near zero, okay, almost, in response to the Great Recession. And I think that businesses got used to cheap money, right? Very low interest rates. And I think that it has been an adjustment. It's been a really, really, really hard adjustment for businesses to deal with elevated rates, even though they're in line with the historical averages, okay? And that is why people are saying that rates are in restrictive territory. Basically, what they're saying is that they're hindering growth, okay, due to the fact that, again, I think that a lot of businesses just aren't used to handling rates being as high. I think that a lot of just regular normal people aren't used to rates being this high. And yeah, I mean, that has been an issue. But again, it looks like the Fed may move on this. And I want to react to this clip of this economist talking about it and telling us what the effects may be on the Fed lowering interest rates, particularly for smaller businesses. So let's get into it.
Professor Jeremy Siegel. Professor Siegel, it's great to have you here. What do you make of just the... Let's now bring in the Wharton School Professor of Finance and Wisdom Tree Senior Economist, Professor Jeremy Siegel. Professor Siegel, it's great to have you here. What do you make of just the emphatic nature of the market response, both equities and bonds? And, you know, especially, I mean, I look at this, I look at the massive breadth, I look at the moves in the cyclical parts of the market and the lower quality stuff. It's almost as if this is early cycle and we've been in, you know, a growth scare or something, as opposed to we've already been at all-time highs. So how do you read it?
Well, first of all, I thought it was very dovish, and I think the market reaction is perfectly right. Listen, small stocks doing so well is textbook. Small companies borrow at the Fed rate, at the Fed funds +1, +2. They are very sensitive to those short-term rates, which now we're going to go down. I wouldn't be surprised to see a 25 basis point at each of the next 3 meetings. Down to the low 3s by the beginning of next year. I think it's appropriate. I've been saying that for quite a while on CNBC, that the short rate should be about 100 basis points below the long rate, and that does put it in the low 3s, and I'm not surprised at the reaction, and I think this means more upside for equities.
I guess the question is, I mean, you say you thought that Powell was more dovish than maybe we were led to believe he would be. A lot of folks felt like he would not want to close off various options, right? You have Morgan Stanley, Bank of America. A lot of these big firms do not have a forecast for rate cuts this year, which says to me that there is a relatively robust counter case to the idea that we should be cutting right now. I mean, I realize it's at inflection points, you're going to get this disagreement. But the idea that Powell is perhaps going to tolerate, you know, cosmetically high headline inflation numbers for the next few months, you think the market can continue to be good with that, even if, let's say, long rates were to leak higher?
Well, first of all, the Fed never forecloses anything for sure. It always does leave that option open. But it's the first time I really heard him say that the tariffs are a one-time increase, and implying that as long as that doesn't spread to other sectors, just, you know, as Steve mentioned, that we should not be looking at that inflation and saying that that's one reason to tighten credit. I've often said, you know, tariffs are like a tax increase. Monetary policy says you should not tighten credit when increased prices is caused by a tax increase. And it seems like pretty much he was on board with that notion. He hasn't seen inflationary expectations go up. You know, my belief is that, you know, the inflation data in the future may not be as important, particularly if it comes from core goods and from tariffs and imports. He'll be looking at the service side of it. And by the way, we know housing is a big part of that service side, and that's been very soft. We see that, you know, prices in homes across the country are finally softened to the point of going down, I think, in a majority of states right now. So housing, even though it does get in a lag in the CPI and the PCE deflator, doesn't seem like that big component is going to be a source of that service inflation. So I think that, pretty much that opens the door for those lower rates. And I think that's pretty much the way it should be. And obviously anything can happen, but the market wanted it, and they got it, and it was more clear than I thought he would be, like he was a year ago. The pivot a year ago, we saw a rate. Now I don't know if it's going to be 50. I think 50 depends pretty much on what the August payrolls are going to be. If we got a negative print, it might be 50. But I think 25 is certainly in a bag, barring some sort of crisis we don't foresee at the present time.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's kind of funny because it's almost at the point now where if you're like the Trump administration, and again, if what you want is lower interest rates so badly, it's almost like, well, you should kind of be hoping for some not so good numbers to come up in August, particularly when it comes to labor, right? Payroll numbers. But what this guy is saying in a nutshell, right? In plain English, so that people understand what he's saying. What he's saying is that when you look at the CPI reports, right, it is probably misguided to focus so much on core goods because our economy is not an economy that is reliant on imports, right? We have a service-based economy, okay? And because we have a primarily service-based economy, we're not seeing the type of inflation in the service-based economy that you may be saying, or put it this way, you might be saying slight price increases in core goods. But those goods, again, don't make up that much of the economy at all, okay? And making decisions based off of that is probably misguided when, again, it's such a small part of the economy. When you look at the rest of the economy, again, when you talk about services, things of that nature, I mean, you have businesses that are struggling, okay? And because they are struggling, rates being in restricted territory, it could be time to start to lower rates, especially if, the labor market continues to show some weakness. It could be time to lower them a little bit. Now, I personally think that likely they're probably going to do 25 basis points. And the reason why is because they probably don't want to risk having the same type of surge in inflation that we saw in the Biden administration, okay, from lowering interest rates too quickly, okay? So I think they're going to start with 25 basis points. But regardless, this is what the administration wanted, right? And we're about to see exactly what President Trump's economy is going to look like because, again, you have the big, beautiful bill. It's going to take about a year or two for the effects of that bill to really start to kick in, right? For factories to be start to be built and things of that nature, for companies to invest and to make decisions. But again, with interest rates being lowered at the same time, that is going to work together, right? That's going to work together in a synergy, and you could see a lot of growth, okay, in supply side production and stimulus from the big beautiful bill plus the Fed's lower interest rates. Now, again, the risk here is that could make inflation start surging again. But if a vast majority of the growth, if a vast majority of the benefits of interest rates go towards supply side growth, then hopefully inflation is minimized, right? As a result of lowering interest rates along with the supply side stimulus from the big beautiful bill. So again, we're going to see, okay? But yeah, I mean, President Trump's economy could possibly get red hot over a year or two if, again, things happen the way it looks like they're going to happen. And this is why I try to tell people that you have to be invested, right? You need to be invested in assets. You should be trying to accumulate as many assets as you can. Invest, be in the stock market, in the S&P 500, index funds, Bitcoin, gold. You should be invested because assets are about to do very well, right? With interest rates going down, we may go on a generational bull run here, which again is something that I called a few months ago, and I feel like we've kind of been in a generational bull run, and it's about to get even crazier, right? If the Feds actually do follow through with this interest rate cut. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.